North Dakota's Senator Kevin Cramer. Happy New Year, Mr. Cramer.
Happy New Year, Larry.
You know, just having some fun, but there's Ms. Pelosi making a fortune in the stock market, which is okay. It's not against the law. Some people would like it to be, but it's not. And she said she is in favor of the free market. So besides being the 2021 stock market trader of the year, I know we're having a hard time keeping a straight face here. Senator Cramer, what do you think about that? Is Ms. Pelosi now a recent convert to the free market?
Well, it certainly has served her well, Larry, and I just can't reconcile that with Build Back Better. It's absolute, 180 degrees opposite of everything that she's been promoting and that the Democrats have been promoting with their newfound complete power in the legislative and executive branches of government. So, but more power to Nancy Pelosi. I just wish I'd find her a stockbroker. All I have is this 401k called TSP that the federal government manages, and I have no idea what they're trading in.
Well, you got to get with the drill. I mean, they're setting up entire Twitter. Although I just read the new head of Twitter through her tweet accounts, I don't know, I guess accounts about her investing, just threw them off. I don't know exactly what that's about. If that's true, it's very stupid. But she's become something of a cult figure. I mean, you've got a lot of websites and you've got a lot of Twitter accounts and so forth following her every move because she's been so successful.
Well, that's great. Here's all I want, Larry, is you talked a little bit about the tax code. How about we just make it lower taxes, simpler code, everything's flatter, everything's easier. We don't punish success, but rather incentivize success and reward people who do well and harm no one. I think we could, if we could get rid of a lot of regulation, a lot of tax code is one giant regulation, we could incentivize a whole bunch of good investment that leads to lots more jobs and a lot more tranquil life here in our free market, exceptional capitalist system of the United States of America. That's what I'm all about.
Well, amen to that. I mean, just as a last thought on this, though, sure. Do you think that House and Senate members should be able to trade stocks?
Yeah, so certainly they should, but as long as it's a very transparent process. I think transparency is really the best backstop to any type of corruption. You wouldn't learn much from my trades. My trades, like I said, are all done in lump sums as part of a 401k system. But and I think we do have that. The Stock Act that was passed a number of years ago did shine a brighter light on things. It's been used. It's even been abused, I'd say, to some degree, because we have had members who have been put under investigation, have had to spend hundreds of thousands of their own dollars defending, a stock action because of their position in the United States Congress, and then at the end only to be found completely innocent after they've basically broken themselves trying to defend themselves against an overreach. So there are tools in place to guard against it. But I think, yes, let members of Congress. Here's the great thing about our incredible system is we're all people. We all come from some other sector of society. We all come from some other place to pass these laws. And the more real life experience we have dealing with the laws that we pass, I think the better for the American people. But as long as it's transparent, as long as there's a bright light on it, I think we should be fine.
Well, one thing I do like, the idea that people, House and Senate members who are in the market, can see the impact of their policies, good or bad. I mean, that's a pretty good discipline, or at least potentially so. Speaking of all which, Senator Cramer, is Build Back Better dead? There's been a new spate of Senator Manchin stories. Reads pretty glum, which makes me very happy, as you know. Looks like the whole darn thing is just dead.
Well, it certainly is if the White House and the Democratic leadership can accept Joe Manchin's no this time. I noticed that you were one of the sources for the Washington Post, which also gives me some warm and fuzzy feelings. But no, I think Joe's made it as clear as he can make it. I don't know why they'd keep coming back to him. But for some people, remember, our former president, President Trump, I said no to him several times about this job, and he just meant I was undecided. So you just never know about where they are. are with it. But I do think it dashes their hope. That's why we're bringing up this week, of course, Leader Schumer wants to bring up the voting rights bill, which is just an absolute, again, fake crisis that they're trying to create so that they can open up the doors wide open for a federal overtaking of our state election system.
I just want to add, I did not personally respond to the Washington Post story. Others mentioned it. I do talk to Senator Manchin upon occasion. He talks to lots and lots of people. And
he sure does. He's a very outgoing guy.
Yeah, he's a smart guy. I mean, that's the way to do it on both sides of the aisle. And those conversations are private conversations. But on the filibuster thing, Senator Kramer, I mean, it seems like that's dead, too. It seems like Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema, among others, won't stand for it, won't buy into it. What's your feeling here?
Yeah, so, both of them, seem to support some form of a voter rights bill, but what they don't support is blowing up the United States Senate. As you know, when the states created the federal government, I like to stress that the states created the federal government, they put certain safeguards in place, and the United States Senate is one of those safeguards that looks out for millions of people that might be in a different part of the country than the majority, and it's worked very well to this point. And so both Kirsten and Joe support, of course, the integrity of the United States Senate, and we appreciate that. Even though they support the underlying policy of voting rights and voter rights, even in the form that Democrats are promoting it, they are standing up for the integrity of our system, which has stood the test of, obviously, centuries.
One of the things that has annoyed me, sir, in recent days is Democrats linking January 6th with things like voter IDs or unlimited mail-in ballots. I mean, I think that is a dirty pool. It shows their agenda is about federalizing or nationalizing the elections. It's not really about getting to the bottom of the security issues of January 6th.
Well, I think we knew that when Speaker Pelosi created the commission. It's why the Senate's work was done solely on the issue of the security and what went wrong that particular day. Had nothing to do with the policies. And quite honestly, I think, to your point, they are trying to take advantage of this crisis, or in fact trying to blow up and over-dramatize January 6th of last year to try to fit this agenda, which is exactly why, of course, the president's going to be going to Georgia and giving a speech trying to tie voter rights with minority rights. All the while, he comes from a state, and he served a state in Delaware that has less access to voting than Georgia, which he's going to criticize. So no, our voting system has been successful, and you may not like what another state does, but that's the other state's business. And certainly we don't want to mandate things like ballot harvesting or not allowing states to secure their votes with a simple voter ID bill that is already, by the way, an idea that's been upheld, I should say, by the Supreme Court of the United States. No, it's just all drama to try to federalize exactly what happened in the last election, and that is wide open access to ballot harvesting, vote by mail, same-day registration, all of which create opportunities for mischief, and all of which should be determined by states, not by the federal government.
And one last one really quickly, Senator Kramer. I think there'll be a vote, or at least a procedural vote, on Ted Cruz's amendment to restore the sanctions on Nord Stream 2, particularly now. I mean, we gave Putin, we gave him a gift. I think that was a terrible idea. But now we've got these meetings with Russia and the United States all week. Is there any chance that Ted Cruz's amendment could pass the floor of the Senate?
Well, I think Senator Cruz's bill will pass the floor of the Senate unless a whole bunch of Democrats change their minds, because there's a whole bunch of them that have always supported exactly what Ted Cruz is doing here. So now it'll come down to whether they're going to stand by their conviction, or whether they're going to stand by their party, because of course it was their president who gave that gift to Vladimir Putin and did great harm, frankly, to national security as well as to our economic security, our energy dominance. And by the way, Vladimir Putin's natural gas that flows on Nord Stream 2 is 41% dirtier than American natural gas. So it's not even good for the environment or the climate. So I think Ted's bill has an excellent chance of passing. I'm a co-sponsor of it, of course, and strongly support it. And I love the idea of everybody going on record.
All right, that's great news. Big news. Thank you, Senator Kevin Kramer.